Welcome once again to the Influencers Podcast. We are here to see the influence of your life grow. That you have been equipped by your Father to be a victor. Welcome to the Influencers Podcast. I'm Scott Young with co-host Dave Donaldson, and we are here to see your life become an influence. You're on the planet to be salt in a world that needs your flavor, light in a world that needs to see darkness dispelled. And we interview interesting people who instruct us and inspire us, and today is going to be incredible. If you watch television from the mid-90s to the 2000s, you couldn't miss Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, and the star is our podcast guest today, Kevin Sorbo. He is 100% Norwegian, Viking blood in his soul. He's a warrior on many fronts. He has starred in over 40 movies. He is a genuine movie star. He's a creative, an actor, producer, director. His life story is captured in a book he has published called True Strength. Listen to the subtext. My journey from Hercules to mere mortal and how nearly dying saved my life. We're going to talk about that today. Maybe it's his Viking blood, but he is a warrior. His most recent book that he has co-authored with his wife, Sam, True Faith, Embracing Adversity to Live in God's Light. And Kevin, we are so glad that you've given us this time to talk with our influencer family. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to be here. That's an old bio, 40 movies. I've shot over 80.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
10 years old.
Watch, I'm going to correct that right now. Starring in over 80 movies.
There we go.
And they'll just put that in. I hope they get that in. Hey, Kevin, you are an overcomer. When you were in the midst of worldwide famous Hercules, you suffered 3 strokes that left with paralysis, partial blindness. Can you talk to us about how that event transformed and brought change to your life?
Yeah, sure. It was the end of season 5 on Hercules. Then the last 3 months of filming down there, it's like the last 5 episodes, 6 episodes, I think. I was having all kinds of problems with my left shoulder. My arm was bugging me. My fingers were cold and numb. And I was doing most of my own stunts, because my ego said that I could, and I love doing it. I'm a jock from football and basketball and everything. So I just kind of blew it off. And then I came back to the States to do publicity in my first big budget movie. I did a movie called Cull the Conquerors, my first big, $30 million Universal Studios movie. And Cull is the father of Conan, for those people who are fans of those books and those comic books. And I was on Letterman, Leno, all these talk shows, and I go to New York, and my arm was on fire. And the studio sent a doctor to my hotel room to check on me. His name was Dr. Dye. I thought maybe you should change his name. I know it's D-Y-E, but still, you're a doctor, and that's not a good name for a doctor. So, but he told me, he said, I think it's cardiovascular. And so when I went back home, my doctor back in Los Angeles at the time checked that out. And he found a lump way up here in my left subclavicle, and he said, I want to get a biopsy on this, which made me a little bit nervous. Before that, I had that biopsy, I went to see my chiropractor. Now, in 8 years of seeing this guy, he's never cracked my neck. And while I'm laying on the table, I heard a voice go, don't let him crack your neck, over and over again, which was really weird. Like I said, he's never cracked my neck because he knows I don't like it. And I hadn't had my neck cracked in 10 years. And, ultimately, he cracked my neck. And I suffered a series of strokes, 4 strokes, actually. I was talking, and I knew something. I knew what had happened. They rushed me to the hospital. Luckily, the voice speech came back. That one just sort of dissolved very quickly. But I spent the next 4 months learning how to walk and balance again. It took me 3 years to fully recover. I still have a 10% loss of vision in both eyes. I still have some balance issues that most people wouldn't be able to notice. I notice it. But I've had a pretty good recovery. And, I finished the last 2 seasons of Hercules, but I went from 14 hours a day to 1 hour a day. And it slowly built up, and then Andromeda 5 years, and all these movies. So obviously I've healed, but I had some rough talks with God. I've always been a Christian. I've always had faith in my life, but I never needed faith until this happened to me. And it was a rough go. And I wanted to call off the wedding with my wife because it was 4 months after those strokes. And I think some of the best advice I got was from a doctor. He said, don't put your life on hold. And I thought, That's an interesting thing to say, because I think a lot of people put their lives on hold. And that was huge for me to sort of look at life in a different way. And we did get married, even though it was brutal for me to even need to do that. But my wife got the worst part first before the pastor even said for better or worse. And she was there. She was a rock for me. I mean, because every time I got down, she would say, Kevin, it happened. What are you going to do about it? And I'm a very strong-willed person. And without exaggeration, I probably did 5 times more than what the doctors told me to do in terms of, therapy and exercises. I just pushed myself. It wiped me out, but I knew the jock in me, the no pain, no gain thing, worked for my brain as well. I had to get my brain to rewire itself somehow. And I didn't want to write the book. My wife bugged me to write the book because the male ego kicked in. I didn't want to show people how weak I'd become, how frail I'd become. And she said, you don't understand. This book is going to be amazing for people. And she was completely right. When it came out and I started doing book signings, I met people of all ages that have had, everybody's got a story, whether they were a 20-year-old kid in a car crash or an 80-year-old that had a heart attack or whatever it may be. And people said, your book made me stop feeling sorry for myself and made me start pushing myself to get better. And that's what the book's really about. How do you get past the roadblocks in life instead of blaming God, blaming life, the world, your family, friends, the government, whatever? The reality, you got to look in the mirror and say, okay, what am I going to do? And she gave me a mantra. She said, every day I want you to say, I'm getting better, I'm getting stronger, and say it every day so you believe it for that day. And it was huge and instrumental. I mean, I don't know how I would have survived without her constant nagging, but it worked pretty well.
And in your most recent book, True Faith, and you mentioned that you are a man of faith.
Yeah.
At what point in your journey did you come to faith, and what brought you to faith?
I've always been a Christian. I grew up in Minnesota, small town Minnesota, typical Norwegian, going to a Lutheran church, St. John's Lutheran Church. I grew up in a little town called Mound, Minnesota, which is on the western shore of Lake Minnetonka, about 20 miles west of Minneapolis. We were famous living on Lake Minnetonka for being the home of Tonka toys. That was the big industry in my little town of 7,000 people. And, it was church all the time, but I had 2 things happen to me as a young teenager. That was huge for me. One was the youth pastor, Pastor Lee. This guy was awesome. Mm-hmm. Wednesday nights, we had in the upper level of church, they put the curtain apart for 2 of the Sunday school rooms. And, we had bean bags and we had, beat up couches and stuff, but it was all for teenagers from 7th grade through senior high school students. And it was called The Room, and The Room was a place for it to hang out and talk to this guy. He was 23, 24 years old, so he was this cool guy that we could kind of relate to more than this old pastor I had who scared the heck out of me all the time. This guy was like, he sort of talked our language, and he talked to it in very, very modern times, very, today times. I didn't say modern, but just today times. And when I was 13, we took a field trip to St. Paul Fairgrounds. And St. Paul was one of the headquarters where Reverend Billy Martin had he would work out of there. And he spoke at the fairgrounds outside. It was a hot August night. It was about 250,000 people. It was amazing. And I did something I normally wouldn't have done. He has all his volunteers, as most people do when they go on these, the different sermons around the country. These people that are, so well famous and well known. They have all these volunteers to talk to you after the main speaker speaks. And he said, if you want to come up, I have some wonderful people you can talk to, you can pray to, whatever. And I went up, and that's something I normally wouldn't have done. Mm-hmm. And I got there, I was sitting on the grass, and I'm talking to this guy, and he's probably 30-ish years old. So I was 13, so he's like a really old guy. And all of a sudden, a hand went on my head, and I turned around and looked up, and there was the Reverend Billy Graham. He had his security around him, obviously, but his head was perfectly just blocking the full moon behind him. So it was like these rays coming out of his, like a goosebumps talking about it. It was just, yeah. And I told that story in the Larry King show. Yeah. And the Billy Graham people got a hold of it, and I got a call from them saying, hey, Chicken Soup for the Soul is doing the only hardcover book they've ever done. And it's going to be for Billy Graham, 101 stories of how Billy Graham has touched people's lives. And they said, would you write that story that you told in Larry King? So I got to write my 3-page story, and I'm in that book. And then they called me and said, would you be the guy that goes around and does the PR for it? Because he's well into his 90s. He can't really get around anymore. And I was like honored. So obviously it was years, it was right after the Hercules years. So it was amazing. And that it was huge for me in terms of meeting someone as compelling and as charismatic as the Reverend Graham. And I've become very good friends with his son Franklin through the years as well. So, just those things just kind of stuck with me. So I've never been a person that stopped believing. It's always been a part of my life.
So good.
That is good. Kevin, what's it like to be a conservative Christian in Hollywood? I got to tell you a little story. I used to work for Pat Boone when I was
Pat's a dear friend of mine. Yeah, I know Pat.
I was much younger, and I had a front row seat to how God used him in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And how many celebrities, during their darkest time, they knew they could go to him. Mm-hmm. And what an impact. And you're also part of that heavens, walk of fame. But that's not easy, is it? I mean, what's it like?
No. In fact, being a Christian and a conservative in Hollywood is like being a double leper, So it was, with the advent of social media and Facebook and Twitter and all these things, I started posting things and saying things. Nothing angry, just the truth, simply the truth. And my wife, she goes, Hollywood's probably not going to like that. And I said, what? No, I'm not posting hate towards anybody. She goes, I know, but you know the way they are. Sure enough, about 11, 12 years ago, my agent manager I'd been with for 20 years, both these people, called me into their office. I thought it was like an intervention when they both called me in because they're never in the same place together. And they said, we can't work with you anymore, and the studios don't want to work with you anymore. And I was like, what? They said, well, it's because you're Christian, conservative. And I'm going, that's amazing to me because this is the industry. As you know, Hollywood, they scream for tolerance all the time. Be tolerant of the movies we put out, the agenda that we have, freedom of speech. But, it's a one-way street with them. And it was sad. And I told them, I said, this is really amazing to me that we are even at. So I'm like really the first cancel culture victim before that even became a term over the last 5 years. This happened back in 2011. But I love the business. I love movies. I love being on the set. I love the creation of things and the working with people. So I formed Sorbo Studios. You can go to sorbostudios.com and check it out. It's my wife and I. It's our website together. All kinds of information on there. Please sign up and we'll keep you up to date with things coming down the pipeline. But it was weird, but God opened a whole nother door for me. And I think that was one of the reasons why I survived the strokes I had. I think God had a plan for me. It just took me a while to realize what the plan was going to be. And this is the road now. Yeah, I don't have that big Hollywood crew anymore. They don't want me to do any more television shows. So I just started doing movies that Hollywood used to do, movies that had hope and love, faith, redemption, laughter. And you don't see that in whether it's cable or network or movies. You see the anger and the agenda Hollywood has to promote their hate, their divisiveness. And I just said, I don't want to be part of that. I want to do movies that have a positive message. And so that's really kind of the road I've been on for this last 11, 12 years. But this has been my calling. We're called to harvest, and this is the way that I was meant to do it.
So you talked about the cancel culture. It's really the pressure of the world, and somehow you have a tenacity, a persistence. You're indomitable. Maybe it's that Viking spirit. I don't know. But where do you find the strength to push back and to shine and be an influence for what's in your soul in a world that tries to conform you to something else?
Well, I did a movie that Sean Hannity funded, came out in theaters about 4 or 5 years ago called Let There Be Light. It's a wonderful movie. My wife wrote the script. I directed it. I starred in it as well. It did very well in theaters. And to me, that's the thing. It's let there be light. It's the first thing God says in the Bible. And really, evil and the darkness, they hate the light. They run back to the darkness, run back into their caves. And we need people not to be afraid to speak out. I get on movie sets all the time, almost every time, especially the last 5 or 6 years, where I get, whether it's an actor, a camera operator, a makeup artist, wherever it may be, they come up to me quietly with no one else around, like we're doing a drug deal or something. They say, hey, thanks for being a voice for us. And I'm going, well, be a voice for yourself. Don't be afraid. So many people are afraid. And I think I'm here to try to wake up the lions. I want to wake up the lions. There's a lot of lions out there that don't want to come out of that den. I said, please come out. Don't be afraid. If you lose friends, they weren't your friends to begin with. I still have atheist friends. I have agnostic friends. I have liberal friends. And They just don't believe the way I believe, but we get along fine because really they're good people. Not every atheist and every, conservative or liberal is a bad person. But, they're the bad ones in those groups get all the press time, unfortunately. And I look at what the media is doing. And I mean, fear is government's favorite weapon. And we saw that played out big time in COVID. Don't go anywhere. Stay inside. Don't go outside and work out. Don't be in the sun. You can't go to church. You can go to the strip club. You can go to the liquor store, of course. But I just look at this, the insanity of the things they said. I started flying pretty quickly after the whole COVID thing, and airplanes were kind of not that crowded in the beginning. And I laughed at them when they said, we got to get on the plane 6 feet apart with our masks on. I go, but I'm about to sit in economy, and there's going to be 29 people closer than 6 feet to me. So there's no COVID in the seats? Is that what you're saying? Only as I walk on the plane. I mean, the stupidity of the way they controlled everybody, and so many people just adhered to it. We left California almost 5 years ago. We live in Florida, and I love it here. I look at this as the free state because we don't have the insanity that's going on. I had so many buddies back in California saying, you can't believe what they're doing in the state. And I said, it's insane what they're doing, and it's about control. And as I said, fear is their favorite weapon. I tell you, the only person you're supposed to fear, and it's in Proverbs, you're supposed to fear God. You're not supposed to fear anybody else. And we need people to wake up and stop letting people set their limitations, especially themselves.
Wow, man, what a word. We noticed that you participate in God's Not Dead. Troy DeHone, a very dear friend, he works with us at CityServe.
Sure.
He's going to join us in Kiev, Ukraine, where we're working. Wow. And so, really a godly man. What was it like participating in God's Not Dead? Did you have any backlash?
It's interesting. I'm going to back up 2 years before that. A friend of mine sent me a movie that he just wanted me to read. He's a dear friend of mine. And he said, hey, what do you think of this script? I read the script, and I call him up, and I said, who's playing Pastor Ben? The movie's called What If? And it's the same writers that wrote God's Not Dead, by the way, the same two guys. They got a new movie coming out right now called Nefarious. Mm-hmm. And they did Unplanned as well on the abortion issue. And I read the script, and I said, he told me the other actors, and I said, no, I'm playing Pastor Ben in this movie. And he said, man, I can't afford you. And by the way, that person who sent me the script and directed it, his name is Dallas Jenkins, and he's doing a little thing called The Chosen right now. So I read the script, and I said, there's no way. He said, I'm doing it. He goes, that's a low budget. I said, Dallas, pay me the lowest that SAG says you pay on a budget like that. He goes, you're kidding. I said, no. I've done over 80 movies. It's in my top 3. It is better than God's Not Dead. But here's the problem with independent movies. God's Not Dead was an anomaly. $2 million movie makes $140 million. That's crazy with no advertising budget. Yeah. And that's the problem with independent movies. There's so many good indies out there that nobody ever sees because we don't have, without exaggerating, you look at Jurassic Park, you look at Avengers, you look at Avatar, Pirates of the Caribbean. They have $300 million budgets, plus $100 million more to promote it. Right? So every football game you watch, every soap opera you watch, you see the trailer over and over again. We don't have that on a $3 million movie. That's catering budget on those movies. So we're fighting that battle all the time. And we need word of mouth out there, And so What If, to me, I highly recommend it to people. They go to Sorbo Studios and get an autographed copy if they want, or go online somehow, do whatever. It's an amazing movie. It's just so well done, so well written. It was Pure Flix. It was the first Pure Flix movie I did. And now to get to your question in a roundabout way, we're actually going to backtrack a little bit because who funded that movie was Jerry Jenkins, who wrote the Left Behind books with Tim LaHaye. But Tim LaHaye passed years ago, but I just directed a movie called Left Behind, Rise of the Antichrist that was in theaters this past January and February. So please go to leftbehindmovie.com and pick up, streaming or pick up a DVD from that as well. It was a wonderful movie to be part of it 6 months after the rapture. Now I'm going to get to God's Not Dead. When he approached me with God's Not Dead, Pure Flix, they said, we'd love you to do this part. We don't know if you're comfortable with it. I read it. I said, are you kidding me? I love this. I joke all the time that I played an atheist college professor, and I say, I'm sorry, that's redundant. I played a college professor. That kind of covers everything right there. But I love that role because I've seen guys like that. I've seen guys that they're on these cable shows. They're like presidents of an atheist club, and they're so angry about nativity scenes that they get them so angry. And I go, how do you get so angry about something you don't believe in? You know, and why do you get a say that you're able to take these nativity scenes down, these Christians, whatever crosses up in somebody's land or something like that? There's 80 million homes out there that are offended by that. If you're offended, we're offended too. So why don't we just be all offended together? But you guys can put up your satanic whatever you're doing. You got enough going on in movies and TV already. Let us. Why can't we enjoy that? But our country, it's weird what's going on in our country right now. And I'm just trying to fight back. But I love playing that role because what I loved about it was there's redemption for that character. And I thought it was so well written, and I enjoyed that part. And I get stopped. It used to be Hercules and Andromeda. Most of the time now through airports, hotel lobbies, restaurants, whatever, I get stopped by people saying, we want more movies like you're doing in Soul Surfer and Let There Be Light, God's Not Dead. Please make more movies like that. Wow. So there's a hunger out there. But how do I get it out there? I need an app that goes to every religious leader and every people like you that you guys can watch the screener and then tell everybody to watch it. Because, I still get stopped by people saying, hey, I just saw What If, or I just saw Abel's Field. I did Abel's Field 8 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that eventually people get around to it, but how do we get out there right away so people know these things are out there? Unless you have that big power, Universal or, Paramount money behind you. It's tough, but I'm not giving up. I'm still plugging away.
You said that you want to wake up lions. Who are these lions that you want to wake up, and what do you want to wake them up to?
I want to wake up people like me because I know they're out there. I always go to Robert Frost poem, The Road Less Traveled. I think you guys are walking the road less traveled. I know I am, where we get attacked. Every time I post anything, Facebook took me down. I had over 4 million followers. Took me down 2 years ago for posting the truth. If I said those same things today, just 2.5 years later, it's been proven what I said was fact. I posted on Twitter recently. I said, I need more conspiracy theories because mine keep coming true. But to get back to a road less traveled, certainly Jesus walked the road less traveled. And it even says in the Bible, it says that you will be, you'll be attacked. You'll be looked at like a crazy fool for believing in God and believing in Jesus. But I want to turn that road less traveled into a super highway. And that's something that I think we all need to do to make that happen. And I'm going to keep plugging away, and I'm not going to stop doing what I'm doing. I don't do it with a angry heart. I do it with, I get sad sometimes to see what's happening in our country and happening in our world. And, we're at a tipping point, and we have to fight the good fight. We have to fight with the same energy that other side does, but with not their anger and hate. But we have to have a much more, the churches need to work together. So many churches don't work together. I see churches going woke right now. When I do my speaking events, I know there are pastors in there, and I say, you need to remember you work for God, not government. Because you guys see too what's going on in churches. My pastor is still Pastor Rob McCoy. He's a great guy. He's out of Thousand Oaks, California, where we used to live, and he works a lot with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA. And he opened up 2 weeks after that 15-day shutdown. Complete shutdown for 15 days, which turned into 3 years. And he opened up and got fined constantly. But people around the world heard about this guy and started paying his fines. And then he went to court and won his court case. And God bless him for that. I mean, we got a church here in Florida, but at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which is 11 o'clock in Thousand Oaks, California, we watch the live feed of his sermon every Sunday. So we get a double dose on Sundays. And we'll stand and sing like we're actually there, and stand when he reads out of the Bible. And it's just great. He's got a great quote that when I met him 14 years ago, he said, I'm not afraid to work my congregation down to a manageable size. I love
that. Don't give Scott any ideas there, Kevin.
So here's a recent tweet that you tweeted. 3 words. He is risen. What's that all about?
The tomb is empty, guys. The tomb is empty. I've got 3 documentaries now that I've done in Israel, and I'm about to go back again in May. We're taking a group of 80 people.
Good.
For those who want to join us next year, May of 2024, go to sorboisraeltrip.com. I think we're already like 50 or 60% filled up 14 months from now. But my wife and I took a group back in 2019, and it's out now. on Salem. Salem is airing it. It's called Irreligious Nation. And we taped our journey walking in the footsteps of Jesus is what we called it. But I'd gone about 6 months earlier with John Lennox. Now, for those out there who don't know John Lennox, he's an apologist. He's a retired math professor from Oxford University. And he's brilliant. And he's debated the great atheists of the world like Singer and Dawkins and Hitchens. And I went 3 weeks in Oxford, England with him, walking around, all the stories. We put in all these great debates that he's had, clippets here and there. And then we went 2 weeks into Israel. And I call it's called Against the Tide. And it's proving God in a world of science. And I call it apologetics for dummies like me. So I know a lot of people feel ill-equipped to really sort of, defend their faith and why they have the faith. And he's just a wonderful man. And I just finished another one that's going to come out this fall that I shot last May. And we spent 3 weeks through archaeological digs looking to search for the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle, how it moved around during that time in Israel. And that's called The Quest for the Throne. And that's going to be out probably around October, November. And I love doing documentaries. I've done about 8 or 9 of them now, and it's just something I've really become part of. So I hope people will jump on board there to just get educated that way. And they're wonderful documentaries. They're so well done, so well production value, and you get all these scholars and people that know a heck of a lot more than I do. I'm just there sort of be on camera, but also be the narration, sort of be the guide to bring you around. But these guys are the experts on it, so I'm learning from it just as much as anybody else is watching these things. But I hope people will check those out because they're wonderful. And I got to throw in another one that was the #1 documentary. This is amazing. 2 years ago, the #1 documentary for 5 months on Amazon was one that I narrated for Ingenuity Films. It's Brent Miller's company. They do amazing documentaries. This deals with the second coming. It's called Before the Wrath. And it's phenomenal. I just did the follow-up to it that's coming out later this year that deals with the Last Supper. And I love this title. It's called Eating with the Enemy.
Mm. Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to ask you, we're going to have a lot of young emerging leaders that listen to our podcast. What would you say to them? They're looking to enter this field. And first of all, what would you say to them? Second, looking back on your life, ministry, career, what's the one thing that you wish you had known sooner?
I wish I would have invested in Netflix when it was $5 a share. because then I'd be able to fund my own movies, because that's always been the biggest obstacle, is to find, like I said, $3 million. Like I said, it sounds like a lot, but it's not that much in terms of making movies. But I think I said it earlier. I said, I really think don't let anyone set your limitations. Too many people let fear rule their lives. And when I was in college, I had 2 summers in college where I'm a golf nut, as you can see. Love golf. I used to caddy. It's a game my father introduced to me. And my father was the best man at my wedding. He passed 10 years ago already, but I miss him every day. He was an awesome guy. I would ask these very wealthy guys at this private country club. I didn't grow up with any money. My dad was a school teacher with 5 kids. But I never felt without, because I had very loving parents. I had very amazing teachers at that time. And let's not get into public education. That's something you should have my wife on to talk about. But I asked all these guys, how did you become successful in your life? Every single one of them said, oh, I failed, Kevin. And then I failed again. Oh, and by the way, I kept failing for another 10 years, but I didn't give up. Yeah. And I always tell people I'm a 13-year overnight success in Hollywood, because I learned a lot by that. I had a lot of failure. Because in Hollywood, it's all about rejection. Everybody's an actor. Everybody's, so it's you're too tall, you're too old, you're too young, you're too short, whatever it may be. There's always excuses not to book you for a job, whether it's a commercial or a TV show, a movie, whatever it may be. And you got to fight your way through that. Well, all that stuff did to me was make me push harder. It just fueled the fire for me. I knew at the age of 11 I was going to be an actor. I knew I was. And I pushed myself and said, this is what I'm going to do. And I just always loved it, But I think people give up way too easily. Don't give up. You're going to have failure. That's life. I learned that failure and no are positive words. Quit using them as a crutch. So many people fail once and they just give up and they go, oh my gosh, government, please take care of me. That's what our government wants. Do you realize our government right now is worse than the British monarchy was that started our Revolutionary War? There's more control over our lives than ever. And every time they get in office, they look at another way to take money away from you, another way to, and they do it. It's inch by inch. And people go, well, it's only that one thing. It's only been that one thing for the last 50 years, and they just keep adding on to it. Now it's not an inch anymore; it's miles they've taken from us. We've lost our freedom of speech. You better be careful. We now live in a world that you are guilty until proven innocent. That's not the way that was supposed to work. It's not the way it was set up initially. But that right now, anybody can say anything about anyone. It doesn't have to be true, but they can destroy people's lives. And I tell people right now, we got to change that narrative. We got to keep fighting. We can't. People got to get strong and not give up. It's as simple as that. Do not let fear control your life.
Kevin, you talked about your dad, and you also are a dad. You've got 2 sons. You've got a daughter. You and Sam are raising this family, and away from all the public stuff that you do privately. Mm-hmm. What is the legacy that you want to pass on to your kids? What do you want to be remembered for years from now?
Well, I hope the way, pretty much the way I was raised is the way I'm raising them. Have respect, fight hard, don't expect handouts, make your own way in life. When you make a decision that you're going to do something in your life, just make sure it's a positive thing, not a negative thing. They're great kids. We started homeschooling when my oldest was only in 2nd grade. And my wife's a homeschool advocate. She travels the country and speaks on homeschooling. She's got a number of books. One of my favorites is a book. The title is "They're Your Kids," just to remind you of that. And I think that one of the blessings of COVID is people woke up to how horrible the public education system is. Now 2 million more homes are now homeschooling. And I think that's wonderful because you see what's going on in our public schools. You see what's going on in our colleges and this indoctrination. And I never had teachers like that. I'm sure you didn't either. When I was in school, they taught the math. It was math class. They taught history. It was a history class. They didn't tell me how to vote. They didn't tell me how to not to believe in God or to believe in God. They taught what they were there to teach. They don't do that anymore. We need to, I think, get rid of public schools, and certainly don't send your kid to college. Be very picky on your college kids because I'm telling you, the majority of them are not good places to go. And so, they're solid, smart kids. They're very good. They're very motivated, and I'm very proud of them. They're great, awesome kids.
And we want to thank you for being an influence, for being a voice, a strong voice.
Thank you.
And we just appreciate the time you've taken with us, and you've given so many little, hey, check this out, check this out. I hope that they're going to put these in the show notes because you've given a lot of resource that people would be able to connect to, and we love that. And I hope people have listened to the names that have influenced Kevin. Pastor Lee, that youth pastor, that was an influence in his life. His pastor in California, Pastor Rob McCoy, even Billy Graham, they've passed something into Kevin. Kevin's passing it on now to the world. And that's what God calls all of us to be influencers, to be light in a dark world, to bring hope where there's hopelessness. And so I thank you all for listening to this amazing episode with Hercules.
And I'm okay with that.
with a great actor and a great dad and just a great American. We really appreciate you taking this time with us. Hey, please continue, my friends, to be an influence where you are. For the Influencers Podcast, for Dave Donaldson, I'm Scott Young.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Influencers Podcast on the Charisma Podcast Network.
If you enjoy our content, we would love for you to subscribe and have the opportunity to tune in to future podcasts. You can follow us on all social media platforms at the Influencers Podcast Official. You can stay up to date, hear more inspiring content, and unlock your full potential as an influencer.
Remember to use your influence to create lasting change that draws the world closer to Jesus.